So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining 𝗨𝗏𝗂𝗃𝗃 weekly webinar that we conduct every Thursday, 11 o'clock India time. And as you see today, the topic is very interesting. And we are going to talk about unifying multi-cloud security with Microsoft. Now, why multi-cloud security? If you look at just one data point that I want to share, I was reading this report from Flextra, and what they were talking about is they're saying that if you look at the cloud adoption strategy for organizations, 89% of organizations are on multi-cloud strategy. They are not on single cloud. They have multi-cloud strategy for their organization. So that's why it becomes very important to understand how do you secure your multi-cloud journey. So understanding or learning even one cloud security configuration and strategy takes a lot of time. So I think that's where Microsoft can help us, and we'll understand how using Microsoft we can improve or we can define our multi-cloud security strategy. And to talk about this very important topic, we have Anil and 𝗨𝗏𝗂 today joining us from Microsoft. So I don't want to do their introduction by reading, their bio. I always feel that individual can do better justice to their introduction. So I will leave it to Anil and 𝗨𝗏𝗂 to introduce themselves. So from an agenda perspective, if you look quick initial 5 minutes for introduction and welcome and setting the stage, 11:05 to 11:50, we will have Anil and 𝗨𝗏𝗂 talk about how do you use Microsoft in your multi-cloud security journey. So that's a very interesting topic we are going to have. And from 11:50 to 12 o'clock, we will save some time for Q&A, live Q&A. So guys, if you want to ask live Q&A, you can wait till the end. You can raise your hand and then I will enable the chat and enable the audio and video, and you can come live and ask your question. But during the session, if you have any question, you can put it on a Q&A tab. So if you look at your Microsoft Teams interface, instead of chat, you will also see a Q&A tab. You can put your question in a Q&A tab, and somebody from Microsoft will answer the question. We have other panelists also joining in. So live Q&A, they will address and they will answer the question that you have. I will also share the CPE, that is the secret to download your participation certificate. We will have Wheel of Fortune 2 rounds, and in the Wheel of Fortune we have sound bar says giveaway, a very decent and very nice sound bar we have got, and this is sponsored by 𝗨𝗏𝗂𝗃𝗃 itself. And then session is being recorded. As I said, all the sessions go on 𝗨𝗏𝗃𝗃's website and YouTube channel. So recording is enabled. We will convert it, format it, and put it on 𝗨𝗏𝗃𝗃's website. Last but not the least, the stand and attend challenge that we give in every single session of 𝗨𝗏𝗃𝗃. And I am bored to death talking about it. We are running these sessions from past almost 2.5, 3 years now, every Thursday, 11 o'clock, talking about guys stand up. I feel like I have to take it out. But again, it is very important for you guys to understand why we throw this challenge. Even if you're working from home or if you're going to office, we sit a lot, right? And if you sit a lot, you might have all these problems that you see on the left hand side of the screen. So what I do is I try to give you guys this challenge when you attend 𝗨𝗏𝒀𝒀 session on Thursday, that at least for this 1 hour, accept this challenge. OK, and if you accept this challenge, if you stand and attend the session, on the right hand side of the screen, what you see, you will gain all these benefits. Weight loss is a very good one. You can lose weight and your brain function will be better, right? So that you can focus on the session, what Anil and 𝗨𝗏𝗂𝗃 are going to talk about. So this challenge is for everyone. If you accept the challenge, go to the chat and say, yes, we love that energy. And this challenge is for Anil and 𝗨𝗏𝗂𝗃 as well. So Anil and 𝗨𝗏𝗂𝗃, if you accept, go ahead, stand and present this session. 11:05 by my watch. Over to you guys.
Great. Okay, because I accept your challenge. The only thing I think on the right side, the person is standing on one leg, so I think that's also not good.
So that's a Vrikshasana that we do. So we have a very active yoga group as well. So that's where we do this Vrikshasana. Okay, guys, over to you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Vikas, and I'm so excited to be able to join this forum and be able to talk about, what's our view on multi-cloud security and what is it that Microsoft is doing, and there are various things that I thought will be best to present for us. So let me share my screen, start with a quick intro for myself, and then I'll pass it over to 𝗨𝗏𝗂𝗃. Okay. So I hope you're able to see my screen, because
Yes,
maybe you can help me confirm.
Yeah,
all right, great. So hi everyone, good morning to you all. So I'm Anil, I'm based out of Singapore. I've worked extensively with customers all across Asia time zone. I have been for a very long time, working with customers in India as well. And I think some of the challenges and the solutions that we are going to talk about, I've been extensively working in this domain with customers in public sector, in BFSI and enterprise. So I hope that I can share some of my learnings and experiences. And also, since we have this quite interactive, so using the chat option, using the live mic later on towards the Q&A, I hope also to learn from you all. So pass it over to Shala for a quick intro before we start.
Yeah, thank you, Anil. And I would like to say I'll accept the challenge next time when I have the right setup to be able to stand, but I got inspired, so thank you. So just something about myself. I have been working in security for more than 12 years across multiple areas, which included least privilege management to application security, governance, risk and compliance, data privacy, across clients from multiple different industries in India as well as in Europe. So I was in Europe before I moved back to India and I started working for Microsoft. I have experience on both AWS and Azure security, and I think being on the other side of the table, I know that what are the challenges that organizations face when it comes to multi-cloud. And yes, so it will be an interesting to have discussions with you, and please feel free to ask the questions. We will take them up at the end. Over to you, Anil.
Thanks, Shala. And we also have Lucy from my team who joined us. She'll be helping with the Q&A along with Shala and myself as and when we can. So we would, love to keep it interactive. So I think it's a, big group that we have, and there's a lot to discuss. So let's get started, and I'll start with the fundamentals, basically understanding the challenges or establishing the problem statement, right? And in my view, it is not limited to these that I try to highlight here, right? Because like Vikas said in the beginning, now a big number of enterprises and organizations are really adopting multi-cloud and hybrid. So hybrid is, of course, where you start from on-prem traditionally, and then you start adopting with one of the cloud platforms, and then eventually you start adding some more, because there are a lot of these advantages of having a multi-cloud strategy, right? So that's very realistic today, and I see so many organizations having various platforms, sometimes more than 3 cloud platforms as well. But Azure, AWS, GCP are the topmost and very prominent, but there are others also coming up. So I think this space will continue to grow. So some of the challenges that I thought worth summarizing here is, I think the biggest challenge is visibility, like knowing your digital estate across all these different environments, right? So having one place to see what resources do we have, what is being provisioned. It can be authorized provisioning, like a legitimate provisioning to in your environments. I think someone asked a question about the presentation being visible. I think I'm trying not to maybe pay a lot of attention, maybe because you can help there. Yeah, so but the slides are visible, yes. So one is, of course, the visibility, the resource visibility, which I also call out as inventory, like knowing what kind of resources like S3 buckets or storage accounts, virtual machines, Kubernetes services. Sometimes attackers also provision resources, and sometimes teams do it for some projects without really having the visibility to the security team, right? And they end up having misconfigurations, compliance gaps, vulnerabilities, and those weak entry points for attackers to gain access into the environment. Even if it is test-type environment, that can be like a easy entry, and then attackers use it for lateral movement and getting to your sensitive information, right? So visibility into what all you have across different cloud platforms and on-prem. What are the configuration gaps and security baselines that you need to ensure, any configuration drifts? All that, I think, becomes one of the major major challenges, and a lot of back and forth between security and IT teams that I really see as well, and a lot of offline information exchange in some cases that I see, which kind of delays the whole thing of keeping yourselves secure, right? The security visibility, this is from a SecOps perspective, because there's so many of these platforms and there are different types of logs, platform level logs, resource level logs, right? So what happens is like, what all do we need to ingest into our SOC, and what kind of use cases to build, what all do we need to monitor, and like moving forward from the traditional virtual machine and Kubernetes based monitoring to, like how do we make sure that the platform level threats, like for example, if my admin account is being compromised and then being used to provision resources, it's more than just monitoring virtual machines, that it will take you to those kind of findings, right? So having this kind of security visibility for your SecOps team, having platform level visibility, having resource level visibility, and having defined those kind of detection scenarios is definitely one of the key challenges. And of course, because having this broad platform across multiple environments gives you much broader attack surface as well. Then access controls and permissions management, right? How do you do it in Azure? How do you do it in AWS? How do you do it in GCP? Every cloud platform has a bit of difference in their approach as well. So having this visibility as well as how to manage it across different platforms consistently is another major challenge area. Vulnerability and patch management, I think, still a lot more traditional, but how to do it across these different environments remains to be again a challenge. So here I think more and more customers I see are moving from VM based deployments to Kubernetes based deployments. So strategies, I think, I mean, you may be in different stages in that journey, and some of these challenges could accordingly be tweaked as well, like having a strong DevSecOps process, right? Having the visibility from the coding level, how to converting them into images and then deploying, and having runtime visibility and runtime configuration gaps and assessments. All of that, again, could be depending on where you are in your journey. Disparities in security controls. It applies to things like what does, let's say, AWS offer for detecting threats related to storage, S3 buckets, versus what does Azure do for Azure storage accounts, right? Or the kind of solutions involved, like Cloud HSM versus Azure Key Vault, right? So there are so many things which are different for each cloud platform. So how do you really have a consistent visibility as well, because doing it on your own individually for each platform again could be very resource intensive and hard to achieve, right? And finally, data governance, because you have databases, you have storage accounts, files which are basically spread across these different environments. So how do you get visibility across your data estate, which is spread across these different platforms, right? So data governance again is one of the key challenges. So like I said, these are not all, but I think these are definitely some of the top challenges that organizations come across when they are across these different cloud platforms. Please feel free to bring up what is top of your mind in terms of the challenges using the chat window. I mean, it would definitely be a good learning for us as well, and then we can discuss more based on that, right? And also from a SecOps perspective, because of the increasing number of sophistication and number of attacks and the continuous challenge to minimize the time to respond across these different environments from a SecOps perspective is I think the top of mind for most of the CISOs. One of the CISOs I was talking to very recently, mentioned that, hey, I mean, we are looking for simplicity, like we don't need just the best of the tools. One of their goals for the year was to simplify things, right? So that they basically save time and efforts to basically get to responding and investigating and responding to threats in their environment. So reducing the complexity and making it more and more simple for security operations, I think is one of the topmost goals that I hear more and more now, right? So how do we approach it? And I tried to summarize some of our offerings, and I think it also can talk a lot about Microsoft approach to solving for multi-cloud and hybrid security, right? So it's not just about introducing a solution to solve for SecOps, for example, which is SIEM, or having a CSPM solution, or having a vulnerability assessment solution. I think we are looking at solving, for the bigger challenge and do it with the benefit of having integration across these different solution areas. So we, start with, let's say, hardening or providing the visibility. So I'm again trying to map to some of the top challenges, right? So having the visibility, first of all, across these different environments, and then the ability to assess what are your security configuration gaps, what are the compliance gaps, what is it that we need to do to fix those gaps, how to do the vulnerability assessment and compliance management across platform level and resource level across these different cloud platforms and on-prem as well at the same time. Number two, how to detect threats, and not just for the traditional VM and Kubernetes services, but also considering platform level detections, right? So using threat intelligence, providing native threat intel capabilities, or advanced analytics like UABA or machine learning. So ingesting data from these different platforms, right? So those are the things which are also equally important, because you don't just fix for security posture, but you also see if there is a security alert for a resource, then what is the security posture of that resource, and what is it that we need to do, to overall fix the whole problem so that it doesn't happen again. So that is a very important relationship between the security posture management and detecting threats. So this is one thing that we are looking to solve as well. Then how to add more and more automation for the investigation and response. So that is something, again, we are trying to solve with the automation capabilities within each of these solutions, and we'll talk about that. And then we have permissions management. So Shala specifically will focus on this topic. So how are we solving for the visibility across different cloud platforms, and how to do the permissions management as well, and implementing the zero trust and the cloud infrastructure entitlement management across Azure, AWS, GCP, for instance, right? And then the data governance, which is solutions you may have heard of already. So primarily the Azure Purview, set of offerings that we have, which basically is meant or builds on your Microsoft information protection strategy, like the data classification, labeling, right? So all those policies that you define, and extend it to the structured data estate, like databases and storage accounts, for example, across different platforms. So it helps you basically get visibility across your data and do your data governance, manage the data lineage, for example, and do that across multi-cloud platforms, right? So this is how I would say we are trying to summarize some of our offerings, and and I'll try to show how these come together and what are the integration benefits as well, right? So simplicity at the end of the day, I think, is top of mind by showcasing this, how these things come together as well, and save you a lot of time and efforts to identify the real threats and see how you can respond in the fastest time possible. So the first section I'll start with is the hardening and managing the security posture. So I think the solution that we offer in this area basically is led by 𝗓𝗏𝗓 in terms of the approach, right? 𝗓𝗏𝗓 is a very, I would say, a simple way for you to track your overall security posture. I mean, it's not aligned to, or not just like saying, hey, we are basically specifically mapping to a compliance or standard as such. It's a combination of different compliances and security standards, worldwide. But at the same time, it gives you a very innovative way to track by saying out of 100%, where's your secure score at the moment, and what are the top priorities that you need to address, the topmost or the most critical configuration gaps, which can help you improve your secure score, right? So it gives you that way and consolidate that across Azure, AWS, GCP, and even on-prem. Then the resource visibility, like how do you visualize what are the resources provisioned across AWS, GCP, Azure, right? And then how do you see the security posture of those? Or if you need to track certain compliances or maybe define your own security baselines, then you can do that through regulatory compliance capability as well. And at the same time, you can identify and prioritize for based on the data classification, like sensitive information having some configuration gaps is higher in order of priority versus a low, less sensitive data having a configuration gap. So for your SOC team, they can actually prioritize what they want to address and where is it that needs their most attention. So to visualize this, maybe let me take a quick tour, and the solution that maps to this domain is what we call Microsoft Defender for Cloud. So it has gone through a lot of rebranding. It used to be called Azure Security Center, you might have heard. Then we called it Azure Defender. Then now to align it with our XDR story, this is what is branded as Microsoft Defender for Cloud. This helps you integrate with AWS, GCP, and platforms as well, other than just doing Azure. So when you configure these accounts, you can define, do you want to connect maybe at the top level, organizational level in, let's say, AWS, or a single account level, right? So you can define these details, single account versus management account. So what happens is if you connect at the management account, any additional accounts being created and resources being provisioned are already included for your discovery and inventory and everything, right? And then if you see, it provides you the security posture management, which includes the visibility and the security configuration assessment, but also gives you the opportunity to onboard your servers and EKS, the AWS managed Kubernetes services, the Kubernetes clusters to your Azure environment. And then you have the Microsoft Defender for containers and Microsoft Defender for servers, which can consolidate your security efforts or SecOps efforts for those traditional IaaS components, right? So you can onboard your servers automatically, and so you can do for your containers as well. So imagine the simplicity of discovering new servers being EC2 instances being provisioned and automatically onboarding them to your Defender for Cloud, and then initiating the MD or the EDR onboarding or log collection or the compliance assessments for those instances. So you don't have to then do this outside, like you don't have to have any external dependencies to discover and onboard these resources. It's all simplified for you from the start. And what all compliance or security standards you want to assess for this platform. So we already support the foundational security best practices, PCI DSS and CIS 1.2.0. I think there are more than 180 different configuration assessments that we provide. Plus, you can also create your own configuration policies and push them to these platforms. So the onboarding is very much simplified. When you go to the inventory after onboarding, it basically provides you a full visibility. You can filter by platform or the environment. So you can say, I want to look for my resources in AWS, for instance, right? And then it gives you the full visibility on what resources are onboarded from AWS and what is their security posture, right? So you will see there are plenty of resources, including databases here, for example, which are discovered in AWS. You will see what is the security posture, like what is the recommendation, what is the status of this resource, if there are any security alerts which are detected. So you see this direct relationship, right? And then this is done all based on your integration with that platform. So this is, I think, very, very critical from a security visibility point of view across multiple cloud platforms, right? So you can save this. Then you look at the regulatory compliance section for, again, Azure, AWS, and GCP, which helps you, assess how is your compliance against these standards. And there's a long list of these across, again, Azure, AWS, and GCP. So you'll see for GCP, AWS, or for the Azure platform itself, right? So this was, just a quick overview, right? How do you get your resources? How do you get the visibility? How do you get to provision resources across these different cloud platforms? So this is from the security posture perspective. So moving back to the presentation. And yeah, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. and I'll also anyway look up later, right? So this what we just saw, secure score is something which I spoke about. So you can now consolidate your secure score across all the different environments instead of just doing it for Azure or maybe separately for AWS. So it's a same mechanism. A lot of customers are familiar using secure score in M365 or in Azure. And so the same now also incorporates your security or secure score across the other cloud platforms. Compliances, I spoke about it, and the sensitive data. I think this was also something important. As you see, what we are doing is we are in the same inventory section. If you see in the screenshot, we are giving the visibility to you with respect to what is the classification of what kind of information is basically stored, the criticality of data for these particular storage accounts or databases that you may have. So whenever you get a alert or a security alert, you can actually visualize this in your security posture as well. So for example, if I go to security alerts, I remember there was a very recent security alert that I noticed, which basically helps you then see what is this. Yeah, I think this is the one, right? So brute force attack in one of the SQL instances. This happens to be within Azure, but you can see what is the sensitivity of the information that is stored in this particular database, right? So we basically do this by having the native integration between Microsoft Defender for Cloud and then the Microsoft Purview, which basically helps you do the data governance. So you not just see what is the security alert, you also see the security posture of this instance, and you also see what is the sensitivity of the information that is being stored in this database. So your SOC team has an easy job prioritizing this for investigation over investing time on maybe a few other low priority security incidents at the moment. So this is quite useful in those terms, right? To simplify their job. The next topic I would probably talk about is the security operations. So how do we do this? I think partially we just saw this. What we are doing is across our solution stack, we are doing multi-attack framework mapping. So this is what you would see in Defender for Cloud, for example, which is like a solution which helps you detect threats across the different cloud platforms. And the same approach we are mapping in Sentinel as well. So whenever you see a security incident, you would also always notice what is the tactic TTP being used. Is it a initial recon? Is it a lateral movement? It is the exfiltration or something else? So we put all these details. Threat intelligence, first-party threat intel, which comes from Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph, or we have Risk IQ as one of the solutions we acquired from the market, or we offer the open source threat intel integration, right? So we have made a lot of investments in ingesting data from open source, doing the enrichment of the threat intel that we bring in, and then creating use cases in Sentinel as well. And the Defender for Cloud itself also leverages the first-party threat intel. And the vulnerability management, alert correlation, all of this again is part of the story. So one, and we address it in two layers, right? So one is this, what we just discussed, like the Defender for Cloud, because the Defender for Cloud can provide you workload protection across the cloud platforms and then give you the security visibility there. At the same time, you need a full-fledged SIM as well, right? So that's where your SOC teams basically operate and they do the triaging. So for that, we have Microsoft Sentinel. So if you see this, basically we break it down in two layers. One is the M365 Defender and the Defender for Cloud, which basically cover across endpoint, SaaS, IaaS, and PaaS, including the multi-cloud platforms. We extend a lot of resource level integrations using Azure Arc. So your VMs or databases or containers can be anywhere, on-prem, AWS, GCP, and then we integrate that to Sentinel as a native bidirectional connector. So bidirectional means if there is a security alert in your EDR and that goes to Sentinel, and the SOC analyst closes that incident after investigation, the bidirectional connector allows you to close the alert also automatically. So you don't basically have to repeat your efforts, right? And then the navigation from Sentinel to the Defender portals, that again is basically what comes natively, here. And then you have the integration with AWS. We have connectors for AWS like CloudTrail or AWS S3 connector. Same for GCP. We have Google PubSub connector. So we have all these different ways to ingest data from all these sources, including the new codeless connector platform, what we call in Sentinel. So any data source having an API, you can basically bring the data into Sentinel. And then there are a lot of new capabilities that we have introduced, like data transformation, ingestion time transformation, so which helps you to minimize what you really need to bring into Sentinel, minimize your cost, and then build the security use cases and leverage the native capabilities of Sentinel as well, right? So similarly, third-party connectors and bringing in the third-party threat intel is something we do in Sentinel. So this was mainly focusing on the SecOps piece, right? And it's again part of the same portfolio. Now, when you see an alert in Defender for Cloud, it could be what we generate in Defender for Cloud, but the same alert is actually sent to Sentinel as well. So here in Sentinel, you can say which alert should be converted into incidents, right? And you can always filter by what is the source. So if you would like to see the data coming in for Defender for Cloud or incidents coming from this platform or M365 Defender, depending on how you would like to visualize, you would see this providing you full details into your alerts coming from Defender for Cloud. And then you can go ahead and see what are the involved alerts, what are the entities, and how your SOC team can basically continue the investigation from here, right? So they see the information coming from the Defender for Cloud and automatically being converted into incident because you have defined the rule here, right? So this is how you visualize the same thing in Sentinel. And if you close it here, so this is where your SOC team works. This will sync it back to Defender for Cloud as well automatically, in terms of the status. And this is where you have your MITRE attack mapping in Sentinel as well from a SOC perspective. So at any point, if your SOC team would like to see how many detection scenarios they have, what's your coverage across the MITRE attack framework, you can actually see across each of these stages, the sub steps involved, how many detection rules and the hunting queries that you have. And then it will help you visualize each one of those. Like there's for the initial access scenario for public facing application exploit, there are, I think, more than 32 use cases in your SIM at the moment, right? So you can go through each one of these by checking what are the rules, what are the hunting queries, and it will help you visualize the same. And so whenever you define your own, you can also do this categorization, and it will, then help you visualize how is your coverage across all these different stages, right? So it's a very intuitive way, and then gives you a lot of value because if you already have Defender for Cloud, you pay no additional cost in Sentinel to ingest that data, and you only look at building additional use cases and scenarios from the data that you bring in, let's say firewall or other appliances that you may have. But Defender for Cloud and Defender for M365 has already given you a lot of coverage there already. So this was on the threat detection. Let me again swap the screen. The next section is, I think, respond and automate. So I think this one is basically, again, part of our solution portfolio itself. Mainly this, I think I'm talking from a SecOps perspective, but I think the automation involves a lot more in the sense of cloud platforms like infrastructure as a code. So those are like the practices that customers adopt. But if I look at from an automation perspective, from a security operations perspective, the ability to discover resources, the ability to consolidate your security posture and security alerts and be able to automate the response is, I think, what I'm trying to talk about here. So within the portfolio for both Sentinel and Defender, you will see a lot of native use case scenarios. Like in Sentinel, we do something called the case management, or what to do, in case you get a specific type of incident. So what actions do you want to take? Who do you want to assign this to? So a lot of these native automation scenarios are being built in into these solutions. But at the same time, you have a lot more additional use cases to be developed, and you might be familiar with the Logic Apps. This can be extended to different cloud platforms as well as to on-prem to build some use cases. And you can trigger these from Defender for Cloud as well as from Sentinel as a SIEM, right? So this gives you the security orchestration and automation capabilities based on the incident, based on the configuration gaps. So you can automate the action. You can automate the communication or notification or triaging, for instance. So a lot of these things are now built in. And you can do this for alerts, you can do this for recommendations, you can do this also for the compliance standards, right? So you can define these automation playbooks there. Also, Logic Apps based automation is used for enrichment of the threat intel, for example, right? So that is again one of the additional use case scenarios that customers consider. Like for example, Risk IQ. So there are a lot of Logic Apps that we provide out of box, which help you do the enrichment, like add some tagging to the threat intel, or do something more than that. So those are the kind of scenarios that you can also build through Logic Apps. The next one is permissions management, which I spoke about as a challenge. So let me request Kshala to take over this and talk about what is it that we are doing for cross-platform permissions management and access controls. Kshala, over to you. You want to take control?
Yes, I'll just share my screen.
Okay.
So when it comes to cloud, what is observed is, as Vikas said at the beginning of this session, that 89% of organizations are now using multi-cloud. But with multi-cloud, when it comes to identity and access management, new challenges come up. For example, in a study which was done by Microsoft, we observed that 90% of the identities, and when we talk about identities, we are not only talking about users here, we are also talking about workload identities. We are talking about managed identities. We are also talking about permissions which are granted directly to cloud resources. So these identities can adversely impact the infrastructure because the kind of permissions they have. And with increase in cloud, these identities have also increased, but then we observe that the permissions which are actually granted versus the permissions that are used, there is a vast difference. Just to give you an example, like earlier, or at least in case of on-prem, we always define least privilege in terms of standard user and privileged user. Privileged user, most of the time we just thought about admins. So if you don't give admin rights, the best practices stated that if you don't give admin rights, just give standard rights, you would be safe from certain security threats. But then when it comes to cloud, the kind of permissions which are attached to resources, or the kind of permissions which are attached to user, may not always be separated as admin and not admin, because even a non-admin user can be given excessive permissions at a very granular level. But the observation is, for example, in case of AWS, you might define a custom role to be used by your DevOps team for doing certain activities. Now, what happens is that this DevOps team realizes that they are not able to do XYZ activities, so additional permissions are added to those roles. And the same role might be used by a number of other people who may not even be using those permissions. So the question is, how do you get a visibility of those gaps? Second is, how do you simplify this entire activity of permissions management? Because a major challenge I have seen clients facing when I have a discussion with them is they say that, okay, they have now they have roles. They have tried to do this least privilege access management in cloud, but they don't know whether they can remove certain permissions or not. And it's not same as the way we used to traditionally do access governance, where you could just say whether a user should be part of a group or not, or whether a user should be admin or not. Here you are actually talking about permissions which are attached to a user or a resource. So the entire permissions management has become very complex. And when we talk about not one single cloud, we talk about multiple clouds that the organizations are using, and the level of skills that people have to actually manage those clouds, and the level of skills people have to actually understand the permissions of each and every cloud. You may have an IAM team who may understand maybe one cloud but not another, or maybe they do understand all the clouds but they don't have a bandwidth to manage these different permissions across different clouds. So because of this, what happens is many times these permissions are left as is. People just want to have a status quo, and which actually is a big risk for any kind of security breach. So this permission gap, maybe someone who is just migrating to cloud, you may feel it's easy to manage, where you might have a defined set of roles or defined set of permissions are given to a user. But with time, these permissions keep on accumulating. And then there is something called as permission gap, which we call as PCI. And I will walk you through what that PCI is in the next section. So then what is this CloudKnox tool that, how do we manage this permission? So Microsoft has a solution called as CloudKnox. So CloudKnox is a cloud infrastructure entitlement management solution, which is a 𝗂𝗶 solution. So 𝗂𝗶 is basically a new space defined by Gartner some time back for managing the kind of challenges organizations are facing in multi-cloud environment. So CloudKnox is a 𝗂𝗶 solution. It provides visibility, but it not only provides visibility, but it can also provide you option to control these permissions on the cloud. So you can perform automated remediation or manual remediation on the permissions on the cloud. And it currently supports Azure, AWS, and GCP, but we do have plans to support other clouds as well. So as I mentioned, it provides granular cloud visibility. It can help you to uncover permission risk, automate least privilege, and monitor and detect anomalies. So as I mentioned that there is something called as permission PCI, which is called as permission creep index. So this permission creep index basically defines what is the gap of, suppose if I as a user have certain permissions attached to me. So what are the permissions that I'm using based on my activity, not based on just my department? So CloudKnox permissions management is able to detect those permissions based on my activity, that since last 90 days, 𝗨𝗂 has used maybe 50 permissions, but the permissions granted to her is 5,000. So why should she continue having those 5,000 permissions? Can I right size these permissions? So then when that visibility you have, that discovery and assessment you have, you go to the next stage, which is remediation and manage, where you can right size these permissions. You can also detect that maybe I use certain permissions once in a year. So I need not have those permissions available to me at all times. I can have a privilege on demand where I can request for permissions when I need it. So CloudKnox also enables that just-in-time access. Then obviously you have to have a report on what your identities are doing and what kind of permissions they have and what kind of activities they are performing using the permissions that they have. So CloudKnox also helps you to with your auditing of the access as well as the activities that are being performed using those access across multiple clouds, as well as and for user identities as well as workload identities. So with that, let me just quickly show you what it can do. I saw that in the chat, someone just asked that in general that if we have multiple cloud, how do we, how easy or difficult it is to integrate? So I have responded, the integration is very simple. This is true for other tools also and for CloudKnox also. So let me show that part. So for example, if I have Azure, I have Azure subscription, I have my AWS accounts, and if I have my GCP projects, I just have to use this configuration where I can say create configuration, and then I can onboard my accounts or subscriptions very easily. We have a video for this in our documentation page, and it is less than 10 minutes video. So it hardly takes few minutes to actually onboard the other clouds on our platform. So it's not at all difficult. Now with that, let me show you what kind of findings CloudKnox can give. So this PCI or permission creep index is something which is managed from a level of 0 to 100. It tells me that where I am when it comes to my PCI score. So high PCI score, high permission creep index means most of your identities, you are at risk because most of your identities have permissions which are much more than the kind of activities that they are performing. It also gives you multiple findings. So for example, in case of Azure, it tells me which are my inactive users. Now, just to mention, inactive users in this case may not be disabled users. Inactive users in this case would be users who do have permissions to perform certain activities, but they are not doing anything with those permissions and they are still enabled in my environment. So you might have to check that why those identities are still there in your environment who are not performing any activity in your environment. So it gives you inactive users, it gives you inactive applications in your environment, then super users, inactive groups. So groups which might have permissions attached to it, but those groups are not being used anywhere. So you can do your groups cleanup activity. Then inactive serverless functions. It also gives you findings related to misconfigurations like open network security groups, the Microsoft managed places where Microsoft managed keys are being used instead of customer managed keys. Then your storage blob containers, which might be externally accessible. And it's not only for Azure, but also for AWS. Multiple such information can be found. Similarly for GCP. So we are seeing PCI for GCP as well as we saw it for AWS. So for example, if I go to AWS and if I click on my, so it gives me the PCI score or the risk, not only for users, but also for roles as well as resources, as well as and findings also for multiple things. So for example, 5 of my EC2 instances have access to S3 bucket. I have unencrypted S3 buckets in my environment. So if I just click on this, I can check the entire report. So the report gives me information on the S3 bucket. The report also gives me multiple other findings and information where I can go and check what kind of vulnerabilities I have in my environment. Apart from this, I can, as I said, it provides visibility. So apart from just the findings and the reports, I can have a visibility on my entire based on my users, groups, active resources, active tasks, keys, serverless functions. I can do a more detailed analysis of my identities, like, what kind of roles they have, what kind of policies they have. I can also do a remediation where I might be able to where I would be able to create a policy using a single console instead of going to Azure separately, AWS separately, GCP separately. I can have a single policy which can be applied to multiple identities from a single console. I can also do a privilege on demand where I can do new requests and I can request for certain permissions. I can also do an audit of my entire infrastructure. I can view multiple reports. There is also an option to do an autopilot. Using autopilot, I can also do an automated remediation. So I can define rules saying that all unused roles should be deleted, or all unused or the permissions which are not being used by users should be automatically right-sized. So there are multiple options that are available through this CloudKnox tool. This tool is currently in public preview and it is free for use by any organization. So if you want more details, maybe you can connect with me later or connect with your Microsoft contact. So till it becomes generally available, you can just enable it in your environment and you can check that what kind of permissions risks are available in your environment. You can get a detailed report of your PCI index. And if you need any help, you can always approach us. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Anil.
Great. Thanks, Shara. Let me get back. I think also we want to leave some time for Q&A. So
Yeah.
I have one section to cover real quick.
Anil, sorry to intervene. It is 11:50, and if you want to take Q&A, you will have to really cut it short, else we cannot take
absolutely.
Yeah.
So let me just take 2 minutes. It's just one section in the summary anyway. So the data governance part is what we cover under the Microsoft Purview. It's a new name, just got rebranded from Azure Purview to Microsoft Purview. It helps you to do the discovery of data across different platforms, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. You can connect to the AWS as well as S3 is, for example, one of the supported data sources. It helps you to do the discovery, the governance, and manage the data lineage as well, and then have the API integrations as well if you want to develop some solutions. Basically, just to summarize this, it helps you to do the data map, which you can see in the screenshot. Help you do the data discovery, so you can look up for data based on the category of it and how is your sensitive information spread across your entire digital estate, right? So this is what I wanted to summarize on the data governance. Not really a lot of time to go deep, but I hope this helps you better relate. And again, on this slide, if you see, it's not just about doing one aspect. It's from, it's completely end to end, like from the platform level visibility to resource level, like servers, containers, platform native services, and then doing the SecOps, the threat protection, investigation, and response. It's a combination of XDR plus Microsoft Sentinel. The SIM can be outside also, but I mean, if you're looking at an integrated solution, we have the native offering with Microsoft Sentinel, and Sentinel you can integrate with your existing SIM, and a lot of customers do that hybrid mode SIM as well. Permissions management, again for multi-cloud, which Shala just covered, and data governance with Purview. And you already saw how Purview basically integrates from a SecOps perspective as well. So you prioritize your high value assets and see what's the security posture and security alerts involving those high value assets as well. And we do it across all these different platforms. So to map the solutions, which is Microsoft Defender for Cloud, Microsoft Sentinel for SIM and SOAR, and RiskIQ for threat intel. But we also ingest from external sources like open source using taxi-based connectors, CloudNox for permissions management, and Microsoft Purview for data governance. And all of these do have various native integration benefits for customers. So this is what I wanted to summarize, not to take more time out from Q&A, I think, which is much more important than us doing a one-way presentation. So let me stop sharing for now. Let's see if there are any questions which were not covered. And I think now is the time when you can unmute yourself, raise your hand, and then ask question. Maybe because you can help manage this part.
Yeah,
better.
Great Anil, great Shala, great session. Guys, we still have few minutes for Q&A. So please raise your hand. I will unmute you and then you can ask your live question. I see Mr. Amit has raised hand, so I've unmuted you. Amitji, go ahead, please ask your question.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you, Anil and Sahala, for covering a topic which has actually become a very pivotal, especially for the organization who have a actually footprint in the different geographical locations, and wherein single cloud service provider, let's say AWS or any other leading cloud security vendor, is not available. But my question is a little on the strategic perspective, when we are part of the board security committee or we have a cloud security committee within the organization, what are the implications we have of the multi-cloud on the data privacy perspective? First wanted to know, do we have any implications on the data privacy perspective, or do we not have any implication on the data privacy perspective? Because we are having a multi-cloud environment, we'll be having an agreement with the multi-cloud service providers. So just wanted to have an insight on that.
Sure, Amit. Thanks for the question. Look, my perspective on this is it's going back to fundamentals. In Azure as well as in AWS, you would see something called shared responsibility model, and data is something which always remains a customer responsibility, and your ownership, be it data security or privacy as well. So data, identity, and endpoints, whatever you use to connect to the cloud environment. So this, in 100% of the cases, remains to be customer responsibility. In each cloud platform, you can look at what are the solutions available, from the platform and from the solution. Like, for example, encryption at rest, encryption in transit. So there are solutions like Key Vault, right, or Cloud HSM from AWS. And on top of it, you will see native solutions within like database services. Like SQL offers quite a lot of capabilities for data classification, which further integrates with the solutions at a much higher level, like Microsoft Purview, which helps you consolidate across multiple platforms and data sources as well. So I would say in terms of liability, yes, it always remains to be the case. With the customer, it's your responsibility, but you can look at what are the solutions available at the platform level, service level, and cross-platform as well, like of Microsoft Purview. So if it helps answer the question.
Okay, fine, yeah, fine, Alan.
Great,
thank you.
Great, thank you, 𝗏𝗂𝗏𝗏. We can take, I think, just one more question. So Karthik, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask short question, and Anil, Shala, short answer, please.
Hey, hi Anil, this is Karthik and I'm from Alsha Group. So I'm a DevSecOps engineer, but my question is, as we discussed about this vulnerability assessment and patch management with this posture,
right,
by Microsoft Defender for Cloud. For example, is there any zero-day vulnerability that we found in the containers? How we can do the patch management, whether it will go for the automation part or we can do it manually, and even for the coming to the regulatory compliance, we can check the container management, right? So how much it could be capable for the compliance, right? So how we can do this, to solve this compliance and get the percentage from 80 or 30 to 0 without any downtime of the services that are running in the containers?
Yeah, so what we do is, in a Kubernetes environment, be it EKS or GKE or Azure Kubernetes services, you look at vulnerabilities in your code, right? So there are tools which helps you do, like GitHub Advanced Security, for example, if you're using GitHub, and there are also third-party tools which helps you do the code vulnerability assessment, finding vulnerabilities in your code, finding secrets in your code. Then when you move to the imaging, convert that into a container image, then you have the vulnerability assessment for container images, which we do in the container registry, for example, with Defender for Cloud. Then you have the runtime configuration assessment, which we do through policies. There are policies which we deploy across EKS, again, Google as well as AKS. We have the node level agents or extensions which helps you do the runtime configuration assessment, so which gives you visibility into what are the configuration gaps. I couldn't demo this because of the limited time today, but once your application owners will need to go and fix. You can automate as well, but I think vulnerabilities may not be like previously known, but some of the standard configuration gaps you can go and automate, and you can fix it through your policies as well. So I think you can achieve it, but you have to do it across these different stages. Automation can help you address some of this, but a lot of this also needs to be fixed because it may impact your application as well, right? So then visibility becomes very, very important, especially if you have application across multiple platforms. So that was my short answer. I think we have solutions to give you that visibility and build automation wherever possible. That's what I would suggest.
Great, Anil, thanks. Guys, we are almost running out of time, just 30 seconds, so I'll have to rush. So you see on the screen the participation certificate. If you want to download your participation certificate, go to EliteCISOs website, go to events, click on upcoming events. You will come to this page, click on CP certificate and fill this particular form, put your email address, put your full name, and the secret or password to download your certificate is SAFE, all small case. Why SAFE? Because next week on Thursday, as we always do every Thursday, 11 o'clock India time. So next week we have a session with safe security. That's why the password is SAFE, safe. And we are going to talk about ROSI, ROSI, that is return on your security investment. That's what the topic is going to be. I'm sure if you go for Microsoft solution, you will pay a lot of money, and that lot of money, how do you drive ROI out of that? That's what we will learn in the next session, right, on Thursday. So go ahead and register for it over here, guys. You can simply click on register now and fill in and register for the event. Last but not the least, that everybody is kind of waiting for, we have this Wheel of Fortune. And if you attended last week's session, which we had with IDEMIUM, I had announced that first 100 people to register for the event will be part of Wheel of Fortune. So all those 100 people who were quick enough and registered, they are all part of this Wheel of Fortune. And the giveaway is a soundbar, a very nice soundbar is a giveaway. So I'm going to spin it 2 times. There are total 5 giveaways, 5 soundbars. 2 are for the people who registered quickly, the first 100. And there's still a noise coming in. I'm going to mute who is unmuted. But anyway, if you are unmuted, please mute yourself. The next 3 will be for folks who supported EliteCISO on LinkedIn by liking the post about the Microsoft event. OK, so good luck, guys. If your name comes, go to the chat and say, yes, you are in this session. Going for the first one now. The first soundbar goes to Mr. Sujit Singh from PNB. Mr. Sujit, if you are there in the session, please go to the chat and say, yes, you are in the session. I do not see any yes coming from Mr. Sujit. So, OK, I will check the chat again later on once the session is done. Spinning for the second one now. And the second one goes to 𝗨𝗶𝗵𝗆, my very good friend and member of Delhi chapter. Abhishek, if you are there, go to the chat and say, yes, you are in the session. I would hate that you miss it. So hopefully you are there in the session. Now I'm going to delete everything from here. I'm going to copy the separate list. This is the list of people who supported EliteCISOs post on LinkedIn. I'm going to spin it. There are 3 giveaways for this spin. So the third one is spinning now. And the first one goes to Vijay Devnath-ji, soundbar. Very nice. I'm sure Vijay ji is there in this session. His chat is disabled. He cannot ask question. He's mentioning it in the Delhi chapter group. So congrats, Vijay ji. Yeah, you are there. You have raised hand. That's great. Wonderful. I'm going to spin it for the fourth one now. And the fourth one goes to Mr. 𝗨𝗂𝗶𝗵𝗆. Mr. 𝗨𝗂𝗶𝗵𝗆 from Mumbai chapter. Mr. Dhaval, if you are there in the session, please go to the chat and say, yes, you are in the session. I'm looking at the chat. I do not see yes coming as yet from Mr. Dhaval. So, OK, last but not the least, fifth one. And the last one goes to 𝗨𝗶 Garg, again from Delhi chapter. Mr. 𝗨𝗶, if you're in the session, go to the chat and say yes. That's about it, guys. We ran 3 minutes late. Thanks everyone for joining in. Thanks Anil Shahala for the great session. Thanks Microsoft team. See you guys next week on Thursday. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.